Hey, everybody. Welcome back to OTDL Podcast. This is Danielle, and I'm here with Lucky. Today, we are having another guest on our show. Her name is MJ. She's going to talk about how abuse in the military ultimately led to an abusive marriage and how she was able to overcome those obstacles and where she's at today. Hey, MJ.
Hey, ladies. Thank you for having me today.
All right. So, if you want to go ahead and just start telling everybody a little bit about your military background and everything that, happened.
All right. So I joined the military when I was about 21 years old. I was working on an ambulance prior to that. And I thought, hey, I want to do something better for my life. I want to have more opportunity. And sure enough, it's like a recruiter heard it and came and recruited me and gave me all this information and said all these amazing things about joining the Army. So I made that split decision. I joined, didn't let anyone know until after I signed the papers. And then I went home and told my parents. And yeah, I thought, hey, this is my great opportunity. This is going to go super well. I had a son at the time. I think he was about 1 or 2 years old. And I was going to give him a better life. After I ended up joining, though, and, went through basic and went through AIT and everything, I was still under the impression that this was going to go great. Everybody I had met would have been so amazing. The drill sergeants, the AIT instructors were all wonderful and helpful. But when I got to my first unit, I actually experienced my first rape my first day there. So I had gotten to my unit. I wasn't given a sponsor or anything. I kind of just showed up, and whoever was at the office was the one that was supposed to give me a room and stuff. So when I showed up, there was an NCO there, and he was kind of like flirting and making me uncomfortable. I thought, hey, let me just get over this. Let me get to my room and it'll be fine. However, when we got to my room, I tried keeping him outside by kind of standing at the door and saying, hey, thank you. That was, thank you for helping me. Thank you for the information. Unfortunately, he pushed himself into the room at that time and he did rape me. After he raped me, he threw a PT belt on me and he said that I needed it the next morning to stay safe. I did report it. I thought that I would absolutely get help. I had just came from basic and IIT. Everybody was super helpful and supportive there. So I did report it and I ended up getting no help. When it went up through my chain of command, it kind of just fell back on me and it fell on deaf ears. And I kind of, at that point, it started to be spread around that I was a troublemaker, that I was a distraction. And then I was constantly being called up to see my first sergeant and commander for whatever it was, for missing appointments I didn't even know about, or saying that my family healthcare plan wasn't good enough. And I remember at one time I was trying to help a male, I think he was a private. He was in an abusive relationship at the time, and I was trying to help him out. I had let him stay at my house. I had my family there, though. My mom and my son were there. But because I let him stay, they said that I was a homewrecker. And then they tried chaptering me out for that too. And that became a huge thing. So then they moved me to a clinic and thought, hey, okay, that's somebody else's problem, not ours. I was still part of the unit, but the way they explained it was I was borrowed manpower. So at the clinic, I was constantly sexually assaulted. I was sexually assaulted by officers, by physicians. That's who I worked with most. These were physicians that were treating other women as well. And it didn't matter. They didn't care. They weren't professional. They made multiple people uncomfortable. This wasn't a secret amongst anybody, yet nobody really did anything. Around this time, I also experienced my second rape. This rape occurred by an officer that was in our unit and had gotten my home information. I had my own home at the time, and he'd gotten my information from my unit, which, as you know, if you're in the military, it's not that hard to get addresses and phone numbers from others. So he showed up at my house, and when I answered, I was home alone. My son was back in California with my mom, and he had explained to me that he needed to search my house and make sure that everything was okay and clean and safe. Me being new to the military, I didn't really know if this was a thing or not. I was completely lost, but I did let him in. You know, I was afraid, and he was an officer. So I let him in, and I was violently raped the second time. I was bleeding. There were bruises. I was unconscious. It was probably the most violent thing that happened. So that was really difficult. Before he left, he reminded me that he was an officer and nobody would believe me. It would be an officer's word against an E4, lower enlisted. And I believed him. I was terrified at that time. So I'm still going to work. I'm super depressed. I'm still being sexually assaulted every day while I'm at the clinic. I'm being harassed. I'm being locked into offices by officers, and I'm completely uncomfortable. I'm trying to report it to NCOs that are still also, they've assaulted and harassed other women as well. So they were just very uncaring. And that's when I finally met this NCO that I thought, oh my God, he cares. He's amazing. He's going to help me. And he gave me that impression. He gave me that word, and he promised he was going to help me through everything and take care of it all. And he slowly manipulated me into a relationship that I was absolutely not ready for and definitely too broken to get involved in. So after I got into this relationship with him, he started showing up at my house more often, and he would like be beat up or have bruises, and he would say that he needed my help, and or that he got kicked out of his house, or that he had a problem with somebody. And I wanted to help him at that time. So little by little, he just started staying at my house more often. And then it got really uncomfortable when he would try to at first manipulate me into sex. He started messing with like my birth control and stuff. So I, at that point, didn't have anybody. I was afraid. I thought this man would still help me. And then he started getting more mentally abusive and emotionally abusive. And then the rapes started occurring. Unfortunately, one of these rapes did result in a pregnancy. And so that was very difficult to deal with at the time. I remember finding out when I was pregnant. I was just sobbing at the time. I was still in the military. I didn't know who to ask for help. The man that was supposed to help me, was the one that had raped me and gotten me pregnant. So I told him that I was pregnant, and he explained to me that if I stayed in the military and had this child, then I would get chaptered out and it would be dishonorable. It would fall on me because I'm the one that slept with an NCO that was a non-commissioned officer, and I would be at fault, and it would be my fault, and I'm the bad person. So I didn't know what to do. I asked him for advice. How do I do this? How do I not get in trouble? So he pressured me into med boarding out from some injuries that I had already sustained when I was in the military. Some of them even being from the rape and the assault. So I was able to get out of the military. I didn't have anybody at this point, really. I was still in Hawaii. I was by myself. I was living with this man that eventually ended up threatening and pressuring me into getting married with him. And I remember that night as well. I was super uncomfortable. I was afraid. I was sobbing. He had a gun at the moment. He was threatening to kill my son. And so I did marry him. I didn't know what he was going to do. I didn't know who he was going to hurt. We got married, and at that point I was out. I was married. I could not get help. I couldn't get housing from the military, so I had to live with him. He ended up taking over all of my accounts financially. He became abusive, and he had all of my money and complete control of my life. From there, the relationship just got more abusive and more abusive as the days went on. The day that the day I was going into labor with my daughter, I actually had to drive myself to the hospital. I had told him that I was in labor, and he didn't believe me. It ended up into a huge fight where he had thrown a ton of things around, and he was threatening my son as well. So before I actually left, and still while I was in labor, I had to clean up all of these things because I didn't want to just leave them, broken glass and broken furniture around with my son there. So I cleaned up everything. I got into this car. I was literally having contractions every 2 minutes. And I still had a 45-minute drive. So that drive was absolutely horrible. It was painful. She was premature. It was too soon. And I just didn't know how to mentally prepare myself for when I got to the hospital. That was probably the most traumatic in that relationship because I didn't know what was going to happen to my son while he was home with my ex-husband, and I didn't know what was going to be happening with my daughter when I gave birth to her. When I arrived at the hospital, they tried to stop the labor. Unfortunately, they couldn't because my water had broken at some point. They said maybe a week or two prior. It was assumed from some kind of trauma that occurred to my stomach. So I'm sorry. It's just
Take your time.
it was really difficult. I was alone until I was able to call a friend, and my daughter was born the day after Valentine's Day. So I'm forever grateful to this friend that showed up on Valentine's Day. She was, she was with her husband, and she showed up. She didn't even think about it. She didn't skip a beat. She is a fellow Army sister of mine, and she was there. She was holding my hand through it all while my ex-husband was calling me and just like blowing up my phone saying that I needed to get home and that I needed to send somebody to pick up my son because he didn't want my son there. And so that was just all really difficult because I was in labor, and he was aware of it. So what ended up happening was my friend ended up leaving to go get my son, keep him safe at her house, get him ready for his daycare provider the next day. And she completely took care of all of that, and she kept him safe. So I didn't have to worry about it through my labor. When I finally gave birth to my daughter, I had a temperature of 105, and I was seizing during when she was actually coming out. So when I finally stopped seizing, I remember not hearing any crying. And I genuinely at that moment I remember seeing a bunch of NICU nurses around my daughter, and I thought she had died. I I thought that she hadn't made it out of the trauma that I had put her through. That was my thinking at the moment. Fortunately, with some time and with help from the doctors for both of us, we both needed it. We had infections, we were sick, we had to be in the hospital for a while. Fortunately, we were both okay. She was born early and didn't have a sucking reflex, so that was difficult at first. I had to feed her with a little syringe and then a spoon, but she was healthy. She was just a little bit behind. She was very small. She was about 4 pounds, but she was healthy, and that was good enough for me. I did end up seeing my ex-spouse. He ended up showing up, I want to say maybe a full 24 hours after she was born. He showed up for a little bit and then he left. But my son was safe. My son was still with my friend. She came to see the baby. She went back. She helped me with my son. She called my dad, and she took care of all of that. But after that, the abuse didn't stop. He was abusive during my pregnancy, and he didn't care about this child. He was still abusive afterwards. I would be holding her and he didn't care. I would still get pushed around or grabbed up, grabbed by the hair, the neck, shoulder, whatever it was. He just had no remorse or care for this small child. So there were most of the nights I made sure that when he was home, I had taken her to the living room so she wouldn't wake him up by crying and, get yelled at when this infant cries, right? I would also try to stay in front of my son's room to make sure that nothing happened to him. So that time was filled with no sleeping, very limited eating. My heaviest during my pregnancy and just in general during that time, I think was 130 pounds. And the doctors were like, you continuously keep losing weight. Like, that's how serious it was when it came to eating, or even getting any kind of energy for myself. The kids, I just try to make sure that they had everything they needed. My son did see a lot of the abuse. There were plenty of times where he got in between us and he was just like, please listen, mommy, please, he'll stop. You just got to listen. And that was extremely traumatic, for a child to have to deal with that and have to be in the middle of that, because they didn't deserve it. They both deserved better. for, even instances where my son was trying to keep his sister quiet, trying to keep her entertained and just not crying so her dad wouldn't do anything. And I know that I'm always going to have that guilt within myself, that I feel like I put my children through that. I know I need to work on forgiving myself for that. But I was eventually able to send my son back. He came back to California, and I kept him safe. I did reach out to his father. I ended up in the hospital, I want to say about a month or two after my daughter was born. And one night when I was in the hospital and I was, high on the medications because of the pain that I was going through, I ended up calling my son's father and telling him what we went through and what was going on. And he started saving money into an account that only him and I knew about. So when it was finally time to PCS for my ex-husband, my excuse was, hey, we need to go back to where I'm from so we can pick up my car and then we can drive the rest of the way. The actual plan was for us to get here to California, and then I was able to leave him with that little bit of money that we had saved up at the time. I left that relationship with 2 suitcases, one for me, one for my daughter, and I think about $1,500 in my pocket. And I had to start over from there. But I would do it all over again. I would do it if I had $10 in my pocket, because from there on out, I knew we would be better off. Unfortunately, it did take some time for him to completely leave us alone. There was still, I want to say 40, 50 calls a day coming from him, calling me a cunt, a slut, a selfish bitch. Oh, you're taking my kid away from me. You're doing this, you're doing that. Eventually, he was able to move on. He did find another girlfriend, but when he started abusing her, she reached out to me, and I wanted to help her. She had 3 kids, and I wanted her to have a better life and a better chance. So I did tell her what had gone on, but unfortunately, that did backfire. He ended up finding out about it. He read the messages, and that's when he completely lost it and promised to kill us. And one of the things that he had always promised to do was that if I ever left, he was going to burn the house down with me and my kids in the house. I did call the police. I showed them and let them know the threats that were occurring. And their excuse was, he is a soldier in the army. He doesn't need to be arrested. He needs help. So they never even helped me file anything. I was able to reach out to a lawyer that did eventually help me to get a restraining order. But even then, the judge very well pointed out that the only reason he was granting the restraining order was because my ex-husband didn't show up to court. So just there were so many times along the way that I was let down by my command, by his command, by other fellow military people that saw the abuse occur, that were able to do something and still didn't do anything. I was let down by the police. I was let down by the justice system when I was finally able to get out. And so there was just so many things that could have been done differently, I feel like.
Wow, MJ. So how long has it been since you've heard from him?
Officially 3 years. During the time of the restraining order, I was still getting text messages and calls where there would either be an inside joke that he would bring up, or just nothing being said on the other lines. And I never actually knew if they came from him. I know that when we were in a relationship, he would do that. I know when I had just recently left, he would do that. But officially, it would be 3 years from now.
And how old were you when you joined the Army?
So when I joined the Army, I was actually 21 years old.
Okay. Still very young, and I don't know what your experience was like before you joined or what you had been exposed to prior to that, but it's really disheartening that it happened to you immediately when you showed up, and it just continued to happen, and that it fell back on you every single time. It sounds almost like they were trying to get rid of you and not fix the problem. And it makes me wonder how much pull this guy had, all of these guys had on the situation, like who their buddies were or whatever. I just can't imagine the sequence of events that led you to this whole situation. I don't understand how you were failed that many times.
You know, it also is crazy when you like hearing this story because I mean, just so many things were against you. I mean, you went to your first command and the guy threw the belt at you afterwards, and that was almost like symbolism in my mind. That's the way I interpreted it, where he was like, well, you better be fucking careful, and the way he did that after he raped you. And then like you go to a new place thinking that you're going to be safe because you're with officers and you're with doctors, and then you have fucking Larry Nasser that you're working with who thinks it's okay to sexually assault you there too.
Yeah.
And like I don't understand. This is like mind-blowing to me. It's like it's so upsetting like it to hear. I mean, the fact that that had to be your reality, and it's not even a situation because so many people are always asking when they hear that women were in bad or men, it doesn't matter. When they hear that somebody was in a bad situation in the military, they always ask, why didn't you leave? But you couldn't leave because you did leave the physical location, and then it happened to you again. And then it happened again. Like you couldn't escape it. And that's what is the most insane part to all of this, was how no matter where you went, this shit followed you. And it wasn't just at work anymore. It became like it was at home. And I don't even know how to wrap my head around all of it, honestly.
Yeah, it definitely, like, I've heard, why didn't you leave? Why didn't you have a buddy? I've heard so many different things be told to me since I came forward with my story. And that's the thing, right? Like, you hit the nail on the head. I told people, I reached out to people, I asked for help, and it was met with nothing. I wasn't getting the help that I was asking for, that I was begging for. And every way, I was just being thrown back on me. I was being blamed for it. I was the distraction. I was the one that's putting myself in these positions. I remember when an NCO sat me down and said, hey, you need to stop walking around by yourself or talking to people by yourself. You need to make sure you have another woman there. Okay, let's do that, right? But what about when I was raped in my home? What I didn't think that I needed a buddy there too. Where was I supposed to feel safe if these are the excuses that I keep hearing? And then when I finally met somebody, right, same thing. I was asking for help. I was saying, "Hey, I'm being abused," and still I was met with nothing. It was considered a personal family issue. I remember a time where I had reached out to some other friends of mine that I'd gone to basic with, and they were no longer in the military, and I told them what was going on. They reached out to somebody that was still in the military so that she could start calling his command and saying, hey, we haven't heard from her. We're worried she's being abused. We know, we have the proof. And it just was, no, it's a family issue. I'm sorry, we can't help you. Like, what if I was sitting at home dead at that point, to not even check in on me? That nobody called me. Nobody was like, hey, we received this information. Are you okay? Nothing. I never heard a thing. And it's just so disappointing. And I think that's what hurts me the most, is when I found out about what happened with Vanessa Guillen. It's the fact that that could have absolutely been me, because nobody gave a shit at any point, no matter how much I begged for it. I remember one time when I was in the hospital after my daughter was born, another NCO drove my abusive ex-husband to the hospital just so he could antagonize me and tell me that I needed to get my ass home to clean the house and to take care of the baby. And that NCO sat there and listened to all of it while I'm laying in a hospital bed. So where was I supposed to go then? Where was I supposed to leave to then? Who was I supposed to ask for help then? But there's just so many times that people throw the fault onto the abused when we're doing our best just to survive, to stay alive. I mean, I was doing everything I could to keep my children safe, to keep my daughter safe. And I was begging for help, but I never got it. It wasn't until I had to reach out to somebody that I personally knew and that personally saw my huge change, me fall into the depression, he watched me fall into an addiction with prescription pain pills that the doctors were giving me while they were sexually assaulting me. So he was the one that was like, you know what? I've seen that you changed since you joined, and I'm going to help you. That's what it took.
Danielle, are you like, I'm so
I
pissed right now?
I have like so many different feelings of emotion toward all of this. Like, I don't even know where to begin because they didn't do anything about for you, okay? But they knew you had at least just your son was at home and they didn't know what was going on. Like, they didn't do a fucking wellness check. They didn't see, like, you were going to, obviously you were going to doctor's appointments while you were pregnant with your daughter and you were going in there with fucking bruises, and they do ultrasounds and they can see if something is wrong. I'm sorry, if your daughter, what would they have done had he died or had she died? I'm sorry. Like, would something, it shouldn't have even had to get to any like to the point for any of this to happen. I'm like, I don't even understand. Like, not only were you in these situations, but you were carrying a child in this situation. And then you also had another child who fucking told you, because he saw the stuff that was going on, that you should just listen to the dude who was doing it to you, because that's how it was already affecting your child. And like, I I don't even I don't even know where to begin with all of my thoughts on this. I'm like overwhelmed with so many different like thoughts and emotions right now.
Why don't we talk about, you got out, you were medically separated, correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, so that means that you received some sort of disability or medical coverage, right? I'm not too sure on what it's like to be medically separated. What was the process for that? What were your benefits? And I have some questions from there after you answer that.
Yeah, so I was medically separated for some injuries that I had. I had some stress fractures in my lower body. I had about 6 when I got out. And so that was the reason for the medical separation. And through this time, I was never like even asked if I was pregnant. I never was like, I never got a pregnancy test, anything like that. So I never even got any attention for that, right? Even though I got out of the military at about 3 or 4 months pregnant. And so I just got disability and stuff like that for my lower half fractures. It wasn't until I want to say 1 or 2 years afterwards that I finally got disability and actual help for the military sexual trauma, and they acknowledged the proof that I supplied, the pregnancy test, the fact that she, was so small throughout gestation, so small when she was born, and just all of that proof that I had, and even that the rapes occurred. That's when I actually got help for that.
Okay, and what was the help that you received? So you were able to finally process that claim, right? And then they're like, okay, you can now be seen for this disability. What was the process like for going through the VA in order to see about getting your stuff healed? Like, what was that process like?
So that was actually absolutely horrible. I was able to speak to an MST coordinator one time. She helped me put everything in, like through the computer that I needed to. After that, I never heard anything back. At one point, I called them and said that I needed some kind of mental health help, because I was extremely suicidal at that point. And I made sure that I communicated that to them. I told them I was severely depressed, and I was told that I would get a call back so they could do an assessment on me. I've never to this day received that phone call for that assessment.
MJ, I really do strongly encourage you to try again. I have mixed emotions about the VA, and my experience with them is that it's very, very mixed experiences, even just for me. So like I've had experiences where it's taken me months to get something taken care of, and then I've found that one person who's super motivated about their job and what they're doing, and they're like, I know exactly who you called, this is their email, this is their direct line, you need to go here. So like I really do encourage you to try and exhaust that avenue. You will find somebody that has a fucking heart and knows the right direction to point you in, if that makes sense. I wouldn't stop at just like, okay, they never called me back. Like, I would call back. You deserve that treatment. You deserve a direction to go in to receive help. I even had experiences where the first thing that they did when they put me in therapy was they first started me in group therapy, right? And that was not my cup of tea. Like, the group therapy wasn't really like, okay, I'm going to tell you my issues and what my triggers are, and I need some assistance in like what I can do to kind of ease my anxiety and my depression when these things pop up. The group therapy for me was horrible because there were all these women that, I know this is going to sound terrible, but it was just a bunch of women wanting to talk about their personal stuff, and they just wanted to complain about it, and they didn't want to like ask for help. They just wanted to tell everybody what was going on. And I'm in a position where I'm like, I don't need to hear other people's bad shit. I'm already like, I needed help, and I wasn't receiving help by hearing other people's issues. Does that make sense? It was only making me more angry and more disheartened and lost, because I'm just hearing that all of these people are having these issues, and we're still stuck in a room together with a therapist that's absent. She's in the room, but she's not like mentally in the room. She's just like letting people talk to each other and kind of letting the group therapy session go where it went. So I went to the front desk, and they were like, I'm checking out. And they're like, this is probably, I want to say like the third or fourth group session that I went to. Cause I really did think like, okay, I just need to go to it. It was once a week. I cleared my schedule and my work schedule to go to these group meetings. I'm like, maybe, it'll get better. Maybe after everybody tells their story, we'll get into some sort of like helpful training or something. Never happened. So on the fourth or fifth time that I went there and I was checking out, they were like, how was it today? And I was like, you know what? Like, this isn't for me. I don't need to be in a group to hear people in similar situations as me. I'm not going to find solace in that. Like, I need somebody to tell me how to cope. Like, I don't know how to go from here. Right. And they're like, okay, let me see if I can get you a personal therapist. It might be a while, but we can definitely get you somebody. I was like, okay, I'd really like that. So I got on the schedule it was literally a month later, and I just waited the month that it took to get in to see this psychiatrist or psychologist, whatever she was. And she was brilliant. I would have waited another month if I knew that she was going to be the therapist that I saw. And that was after 4 straight weeks of going to this group therapy. That was after, a month of saying, okay, this group therapy thing is going to start in a month. So like a total of 3 months waiting for a personal psychologist appointment. And it was worth it because I finally received some advice and some guidance on my own personal trauma and how to move forward with it. And I think that if you just try again, try some different numbers, where are you located right now?
So I'm located in California right now.
Are you in San Diego?
No, I'm in the Palm Springs area.
Okay. All right. So is there a VA in Palm Springs, or is it the San Diego one that you'd have to travel down to?
the Loma Linda one that I have to travel
Oh,
to.
okay. All right. So I would definitely reach out again and see who you end up on the phone with. Kind of let them know that you're having an issue with scheduling something and getting yourself into something that can help you, and eventually you're going to hit a jackpot with somebody, because it's my belief that there are people there who are, I think they might just be like retired active duty, or they served their 4 years and they got out and they have similar experiences, so their like sole purpose in life is to work at the VA and get these people. But you're not always going to get that person on the phone. You're going to get the disgruntled person who deals with phone calls all day long, who's maybe had a bad day, and you just got to kind of trudge through that and through those people to get to the right people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it absolutely does. I mean, I know that like outside of the VA, I've definitely met people, working with foundations or nonprofits that are definitely super supportive and super helpful. They identify with me and the situations I've gone through. And I absolutely have no doubt that, as long as I keep trying, and anybody really keeps trying, yeah, like you said, you'll find that one person that really does give a shit, and that's really all it takes, is that one person. Because they understand, and they can connect with your experience, or they just care. So I am absolutely going to continue to try, and definitely my goal, like yours was, is to heal and to move forward and to be healthy. I want to be able to be that healthy person for my children as well. And I'm just going to continue to do what I need to do to figure that out and to heal and to get that help that I need.
I do want to ask you, I'm super excited that you brought this up. You said that you've gone through other organizations that you were able to seek help from. Can you talk to us a little bit about those organizations that you went through?
Absolutely. So before I came forward with my story, I was definitely getting a lot of help from domestic violence abuse shelters, and that was extremely helpful. And that's not just for military. That's anybody that's in a DV relationship and that needs that help. Those shelters, those organizations, those hotlines are there. They're amazing, and they are willing to do whatever they can to help. There are also organizations for DV that are military related. I can definitely get the information for those. I didn't work with those, so I don't have the names off the top of my head, but they even do emergency extractions. So I definitely urge anybody that's in a violent relationship or any kind of abusive relationship to get out. There is help. There are wonderful people. There's wonderful organizations. There's shelters that are willing to do whatever they can to get you out of that and to get you healthy and safe again. After I came out with my story, I definitely connected with Invisible Combat. They've been amazing. The Pink Berets also have amazing resources. They have a like kind of support group once a week that's been super helpful to me personally. Another one, Wounded Warriors, Invisible Combat is amazing. Pink Berets, those would be the top three that would come to mind. But honestly, I have found most of these just from like Facebook, and really, really going into that and seeing that there's programs, there's retreats, and it's just Wounded Warriors has probably been the one with the biggest help, that's offered me the most help, that's offered me help with my claims. They've offered me help legally. They've offered me help with a therapist. They've also offered me help with a like a weekly buddy. That's been amazing. But yeah, like I said, Invisible Combat and the Pink Berets are two that I know have weekly MST support groups. So that's been amazing as well.
What other things have you done for coping with everything that happened to you, and also your son, because you mentioned that he had witnessed things. Are you guys doing anything to work on that?
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you asked that question, actually, because that's so important. So it did affect my son. I have gotten him into counseling. He has gotten so much support and help and care from not only his father, but their family. His father's friends have been there, whether it's just a trip to go fishing or, a trip to the pool. But just being there and really talking to him and letting him unpack all of that has been really helpful for him. I've noticed that he doesn't open up with me as much because he still feels the need to protect me, to the point where he doesn't and still doesn't, has never called me mom or mommy. He's always called me babe, because he thinks that he has to be that adult in the relationship, which breaks my heart. And I definitely do whatever I can to fix that thinking, but it's going to take time. But it's just little things like that, and just making sure that he can feel that he's a kid and that he doesn't have those responsibilities or worries anymore, because he is a child and he needs to just be a child. Another thing, actually, that a lot of people don't usually realize is that when you are pregnant with a child and you're going through abuse, that child does actually get some of those effects later after they're born. So what happens naturally is your natural like stress hormones and just those emotions and feelings that you have when you're pregnant, if they're heightened, then that's going to be your child's normal. That's where their normal range is. And so my daughter was naturally born, to be more stressed out, to things would get to her a lot easier. She would get frustrated. She still does a lot easier. She still has panic attacks when she hears certain noises or when she like smells certain smells. And a lot of that is that her brain isn't remembering these specific memories, but her body is. So her body is being triggered into that fight or flight because of the neurological synapse that's occurring in her mind. So we've actually had to, and I didn't know any of this, when I was in a relationship or even immediately after I got out. This happened because we had to take her to counseling, to therapy. She was behind on talking, on walking, on everything. So I've had to help her cope as well. She still has night terrors, and that's just a lot of helping them both cope, is to just kind of talking it out with them and explaining to them that they're safe. Everything is okay now. I also am with a wonderful partner that has been a father to both of these kids. My daughter only knows him as her daddy, and if anybody asks her, that's her daddy, and that's it. There's no other man in her life. And he's also a veteran. He's a combat veteran, and I think I really needed that. I think that safety and that comfort of a man that was a soldier, and that I could finally change that perspective that I have of them. I think that was really helpful as well, and kind of tuning me out the whole, they're all evil, they're all scary, they're all going to hurt me. That helped me heal. And just everything that he's done for me, and pulling me out of my shell, and ensuring that I'm healthy for me, that I'm pulling myself out of this depression for me, and I'm getting out and I'm being physical and I'm pushing myself in school for me. And that was something that was so important, because he wanted to help me find that control and balance back in my life. And I will always be grateful for him for that, because it wasn't those toxic or unhealthy relationships that was codependent. He wanted to make sure that it was all for me every step of the way. So I've also finished school. I'm currently doing my master's program, and it's in psychology. My ultimate goal is to be a neuropsychologist, and that's because it's helped my healing so much, learning about what's going on in the brain, learning about, oh my gosh, I'm having this panic attack because I smelled this cologne. Is it all in my head? Am I crazy? I was able to learn while I was in school that no, this is just going to naturally trigger that, because when my body would smell that cologne, or when my body, would hear that noise, that meant my body needs to go into a fight, flight, or even freeze. So learning more about that helped me understand myself and my body better, and that's helped me heal.
I feel like that is so important to touch on. And I mean, I've brought up brain functioning in multiple episodes already, because it's so important to understand that your brain, there are things that are involuntary and you don't even want to be thinking about certain things. And your brain is like, remember when this happened? And I mean, I know, like when you were talking about your partner that you're with now, that is super important too, because growing up, I grew up and my dad was an addict, and he was horrible to my mom. And my brothers, I have two older brothers, and they witnessed pretty much everything. They witnessed, they were there. Like my dad, it's disgusting. Like he tried to have his friends gang rape my mom, and they just different scenario, like him lighting all of her belongings on fire in the driveway. And I didn't see all of that, but when I was a baby, like, because my mom stayed with him, and that was something that people couldn't understand, but the explanation behind it was, well, that's what you did. And when I was little, my mom, fortunately, my dad was super high off cocaine. I was in the living room with him. I think I was like 1 or 2 years old. I don't even know. I don't remember it. And I guess he just started throwing shit everywhere when he was trying to hang up wallpaper because it wasn't hanging up correctly. And my mom said the way that I reacted, she said she looked at me and saw like how much fear was on my face that I was like hyperventilating. I couldn't even cry because I was so scared as like a fucking 1-year-old. And that's when she was like, no, you got to get the fuck out. We're getting divorced. I'm not doing this anymore. So I was fortunate enough to not grow up and see all of that. But my brothers did. And it has carried with, especially my oldest brother, with the relationships that he has with people, because it was never addressed. And my mom, there are certain times where, like, just the way she responds or reacts to certain situations now, I mean, when you sit back and you really think about the shit that she had to go through with him, it's like, okay, that makes so much more sense now. I remember what you said that you had to deal with. And I was also very lucky to have the stepdad that I have. He's been in my family's lives since I was like 5 years old. And I was able to see that how he is how a healthy relationship is, and a productive relationship, and what a man actually should be like to women. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, because I got to see, even though my parents were divorced, I would go with my dad on weekends, but he still stayed the same asshole that he had always been. So I got to see how he was, and then I got to see my stepdad. So I got to see both sides. But it's so shitty and unfortunate when kids are put in the middle of these situations and they have no control, obviously, over anything. And it makes them grow up so fast, and it affects kids psychologically in the long run. And they grow up and you're like, why are you so fucked up? And half the time, like, some of these things happen when they're in the womb. Like, they don't even, they don't know, or they're so small that there's no way that they have an actual memory of it, but it has stuck in their brain because their brain has absorbed all of these things.
Absolutely. Like the way you explained it is perfectly right. A perfect example would be my ex-husband used to have a motorcycle, and we all knew right as soon as we heard that motorcycle coming down the street and pulling into the garage what was going to happen after he came in. We were all aware of it. But in my mind, right at the time, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to get help from this eventually. I will get help from my son. My daughter won't remember any of it. That was always my thinking. I didn't realize how absolutely wrong I was until I finally left him and I saw the first panic attack occur in her. And I will never forget it. We were standing outside and she heard an ambulance, or I'm sorry, she heard a motorcycle. And like you said, she was also one and a half. She was still very small, and she just completely went into a panic attack. She had no idea why. She had no idea. She couldn't explain to me what she was scared of, what was going on. It was that noise. And it continued to happen over and over every time there was a motorcycle. So that was one of the things I had to always kind of be aware of and careful of, that there were certain smells and certain sounds that just immediately triggered her. And this child had no memory or recollection of what actually happened, right? But her body did. Her body, we all of our bodies have this thing where we need to survive. That's ultimately the goal of the body, is to survive, to keep us alive. So that's why if something happened to us, even if we were in the womb when we were small, that's why a lot of people have phobias. Something happened and triggered this. So now anytime the brain connects those two dots, we are going to panic, fight or flight or freeze. Something is going to happen and you can die. That's the automatic thinking that occurs. When I met the man I'm with now, he had a motorcycle, and that was so difficult because of what it would trigger with my daughter. So he would make sure to be very careful about that. He wouldn't, ride it anywhere around her or anything like that. And he slowly started getting her more comfortable with it, to the point now that if you ask her, she herself wants a motorcycle. So we reconnected those dots. And that's the ultimate goal in healing for children, and even for ourselves, is reconnecting those dots to a more positive experience. So that's one of the things that he's helped with overall, with not just myself, but with both kids, is reconnecting those dots where this isn't something scary now. This is something good and we're safe. Right. So that's what happened with my son in another man being in the home and having a stepfather figure, and allowing someone into the family to be close to his sister. So unfortunately, she still has her bio dad's last name, but we don't say it, not for us, but because it triggers my son so much, where he has blatantly told us, I don't want to hear that name. That is not her last name. Give her any other last name and we'll say any other last name, but we won't talk about that man. He hurt you and he hurt her. And we don't, right? And even if you ask her, like I said, the only father she knows is my partner. She fully believes at 4 years old that they have the same last name. And it's all just from trying, like I said, we have to reconnect these dots, right? We're safe now, and that's what matters.
MJ, thank you so much for coming on and talking about it. I know that had to be hard, and every single time we bring someone on, I'm just completely blown away by the amount of courage that you guys show, and like your authenticity and speaking it out. And I don't know how hard this is for you, but it doesn't matter. I'm super thankful that you were able to be on here and say what you needed to say and speak that out, because I can almost guarantee you that there's somebody right now who may listen to the podcast who's going through similar things, like being manipulated into a relationship or thinking that she can't escape. And I hope that whoever she is, she finds a little bit of courage and a little bit of strength from your words, and a little bit of hope from how your life turned out. I really do thank you for coming on and taking the time to talk with us.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate hearing everything that you had to say, and just seeing how you're able to turn a negative experience into as positive of an experience as it could be, because you made sure that that your story didn't end there. Like you took the initiative, you made the changes, and it's not only benefiting you, but it's benefiting your children in the long run. And I think that's super important too. So it takes a lot of strength to be able to leave a situation, especially when you feel so trapped and helpless and you don't know what the outcome's going to be. So I think that's really important too for people to hear, because if there's anything, if you're in any kind of situation and you need help, just fucking email us or message us or do something. Or it doesn't, it doesn't have to be your command. Like, you just let us know and we'll try to help you as much as we can and get you resources. And that's why I really am enjoying doing this podcast so much, because the stories and even it's honestly, is like cliche as it sounds, inspirational to hear this stuff that people are able to overcome and after they've gone through all kinds of shit. And honestly, that's, women are really fucking strong, and MJ's proof if you needed more of it. So, but yeah, thank you so much for coming on the show.
I want to thank you guys as well for having me and giving me the space to tell my story. And I kind of just want to reiterate what you guys have already said. If you are in any kind of situation that's abusive in any way, whether it be financial, mental, sexual, literally anything, manipulation, coercion, there's so many things that actually are considered abuse that so many people don't know about. If you are not in a healthy relationship, regardless if it's a romantic partner or a family member, you need to get out of that. It's toxic and it's not going to be healthy for you at any point in your life. If you don't have the strength or the resources that you need to make that happen, please reach out to these lovely ladies, or even to me. I'm on social media. I can be reached through these ladies as well. I will do whatever I can to make sure that you can leave that relationship healthy and safe, and it gets better. Military sexual trauma, domestic violence, any of these traumatic experiences don't define you. They happened, but they don't define you. What you decide to do with your life afterwards is what defines you. My life didn't end because I didn't allow it to end, and we just have to find that strength within ourselves and within each other. There's people that are here to help us and to love us, and I decided to be resilient and say, you know what, let me tell you a story. She makes it in the end, right? That's the goal, is we make it in the end. And now my children are going to have a wonderful fucking life. And that's what matters. Do it for yourself. Do it for your children. Do it for your fucking dog if it needs to be for anything. But get out, have a healthy and beautiful life and a relationship that you deserve.
I feel like you just said everything that need to be said. Don't fucking protect somebody who can't respect you. And that's bottom line. So thank you so much for being on the show. And thank you so much for the positive comments and emails and support from everybody on social media, and even people that we know who have told us how much the podcast has been a positive thing for them, even if they haven't been in the military. If anybody wants to message us, our email is otdlpodcast@gmail.com. Our Instagram is OTDL Podcast. Just keep sending us your stories, and thank you so much. And we will talk to you next time.